Bonita Johnson forgot her laptop at work at 11:30 p.m. on a Friday. At midnight, the man who owned the penthouse office showed up at her apartment to deliver it himself. She answered the door in old pajama pants and a faded Howard University t-shirt. He was in a suit that probably cost more than her car, holding her entire career in his hands. Sometimes the worst mistakes lead to the most dangerous complications. The day had started exhausting, which should have been Bonita's first warning that disaster was lurking. She'd arrived at Sterling Financial Group at 6:30 a.m., coffee already cold, ready to finalize the Morrison account analysis she'd been perfecting for 4 weeks. The presentation was scheduled for 9 a.m., Monday morning in the executive boardroom with senior partners who controlled $300 million in assets and had zero tolerance for errors. No room for mistakes. She was 28 years old and this was her moment. 2 years at Sterling Financial. 2 years of proving she belonged in corporate finance. 2 years of being one of only 3 black women in the analytics department and having to work 3 times as hard to be considered equally competent. This presentation was her opportunity to change that narrative, to demonstrate she wasn't just capable, she was invaluable. She'd worked through breakfast, ignored her lunch break, stayed glued to her desk while the office gradually emptied around her. By 8 p.m., the analyst floor was deserted, except for her. By 9:30, most of the building was dark. By 10, the security guard did his rounds and reminded her the building would lock down at 11. By 11:15, her eyes were burning. The numbers on her screen were starting to blur together. The financial models were perfect. The projections were airtight. The client database was updated. Everything was loaded onto her laptop, backed up to the cloud, ready to go. She could review it one final time Sunday evening before the Monday meeting. She had this under control. Bonita saved everything twice, closed all her programs, organized the papers on her desk into neat stacks, grabbed her purse, her phone, her keys, her water bottle, did a final scan of her workspace to make sure nothing important was left behind. Badge, check. Wallet, check. Apartment keys, check. Phone charger, check. Sanity, barely hanging on, but present. She took the elevator down 42 floors, nodded to the night security guard, stepped out into the cool October air at 11:23 p.m. The subway station was 2 blocks away. She could be home by midnight, asleep by 12:30, actually get a decent night's rest for once. Her apartment building was quiet when she arrived at 11:47. The elevator was broken again, so she took the stairs to the 4th floor. Her legs felt like lead. Her shoulders ached from hunching over her keyboard for 16 hours. Her brain felt like it was swimming through fog. She unlocked her apartment door, stepped inside, locked it behind her, dropped her purse on the small table by the entrance, kicked off her heels that had been murdering her feet since 6:30 that morning, padded into her kitchen in stockinged feet to grab water from the refrigerator, took 3 long drinks, set the glass down on the counter, reached for her phone to set her alarm for tomorrow. That's when her stomach dropped straight through the floor. The laptop. Her laptop with the entire Morrison presentation, the financial models she'd spent 4 weeks perfecting, the client database with sensitive information, the projections that could make or break her career. Everything. Still sitting on her desk on the 42nd floor, Bonita's hand froze halfway to her phone, her breath caught in her chest. The exhaustion that had been pulling at her bones vanished, replaced by pure adrenaline-spiked panic. No. She pressed her palms against the cool counter, trying to force her brain to work through the rising panic. The building was locked. Security wouldn't let her back in without executive authorization. She'd have to call her supervisor, admit she'd been so careless, so unprofessional, so completely irresponsible that she'd left the single most important thing. After 2 years of being meticulous, after 2 years of never making mistakes, after 2 years of being so careful, so controlled, so perfect, that no one could question her competence. And she'd left her laptop at the office, like some careless intern on their first week. Bonita grabbed her phone with shaking hands. 11:51 p.m. Too late to call anyone. Too late to go back. Too late to fix this tonight. She'd have to wait until morning, show up at 6 a.m., when security arrived for the weekend shift, grovel for them to let her in. Pray that her laptop was still exactly where she left it and that no one had seen it sitting there abandoned. She pressed her forehead against her kitchen cabinet, fighting the urge to scream or cry or both. A knock echoed through her apartment. Bonita's head snapped up. Her heart stopped, then started again at double speed. Nobody knocked at midnight. Not in this building, not on this floor, not ever. She moved slowly through her small living room toward the door, every nerve ending suddenly alert. Through the peephole, She could see the hallway light casting shadows, and a man standing at her door. Tall, dark hair pulled back, sharp features, wearing a suit that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. Not a fourth-floor walk-up at midnight, and in his hands, her laptop bag. Bonita's breath stopped completely. She recognized him. The man from the penthouse office on 45. The one who appeared maybe once a month, always after hours, always alone. The one whose name was on some of the documents she processed, but whose face she'd only seen twice in 2 years. The one everyone whispered about but nobody actually knew. Brian Hirano was standing at her door at midnight, holding her career in his hands. And somehow, that was infinitely more terrifying than the missing laptop had ever been. If you're already hooked by Bonita's midnight visitor, and want to see exactly how far she'll fall into Brian Hirano's dangerous world, you need to subscribe right now. This story gets darker, more intense, and infinitely more complicated. Bonita will face choices that will test everything she believes about herself. Brian will prove he's far more dangerous and far more vulnerable than that first encounter revealed. And the laptop that brought them together? It's just the beginning of secrets that could destroy them both. Don't miss a single chapter of their descent into a world where love and survival become the same thing. Subscribe now, because what happens next will change everything you think you know about power, betrayal, and the price of being truly seen by someone who could destroy you. The story is just getting started. Bonita Johnson's vision blurred as she stared at the final spreadsheet on her screen. The numbers had stopped making sense 3 hours ago, but she'd pushed through anyway because that's what you did when your entire career hung on a single presentation. The Morrison account analysis had consumed her life for 4 weeks, and now, at 11:15 p.m., on a Friday, it was finally done. She saved the file one last time, then again for good measure, then once more because exhaustion made you paranoid. 16 hours. She'd been at her desk for 16 hours straight, and her body was staging a full revolt. Her shoulders screamed from hunching over her keyboard. Her eyes felt like someone had rubbed sand into them. Her brain had achieved that special kind of exhaustion where thoughts moved through sludge. The office around her was dark and silent. Everyone else had left hours ago. Most people had probably left by 6, heading home to families and Friday night plans and lives that existed beyond financial models and quarterly reports. Bonita used to have Friday night plans. Somewhere in the blur of the past 4 weeks, those had disappeared too. Her phone buzzed. Simone, checking in like she always did. Still alive? The text read. Barely. Heading home now. Bonita typed back, already shutting down programs and organizing papers into neat stacks on her desk. Everything had to be perfect, even when no one would see it until Monday. She grabbed her purse, her phone, her keys, did her usual check for essentials. Badge, wallet, apartment keys, phone charger, everything accounted for. She stood up, felt her back crack in 3 places, and grabbed her coat from the back of her chair. The building was eerily quiet as she made her way to the elevator. Marcus, the night security guard, waved from his post in the lobby. Big day Monday, Miss Johnson. The biggest. She managed a tired smile. Wish me luck. You don't need luck. You've got this. If only she felt as confident as Marcus sounded. The subway ride home was a blur of fluorescent lights and exhaustion. Bonita barely remembered walking from the station to her building, climbing the stairs because the elevator was broken again, unlocking her door, dropping her purse on the entry table. She went straight to the kitchen, poured herself water, drank half the glass. Her reflection in the darkened window looked like hell. Wrinkled blouse, hair falling out of its bun, mascara smudged under her eyes. She looked like someone who'd just worked 16 hours without a break, which was accurate. She reached for her phone to set an alarm for tomorrow, give herself time to review the presentation one final time before Monday. That's when she saw her empty hands, her very empty hands that should have been carrying a laptop bag. The water glass slipped from her fingers, bouncing off the counter and shattering on the tile floor. Her laptop with the Morrison presentation, with 4 weeks of work, with the client database, with the financial models, with everything she needed for Monday's meeting. Her laptop with those notes she'd made about the suspicious transactions in the subsidiary accounts, the ones she'd planned to ask her supervisor about quietly. Still sitting on her desk on the 42nd floor of a locked building, Bonita stood frozen in her kitchen, water and glass shards spreading across the floor, panic rising in her chest like a wave about to crash. She never forgot things. Never. That was her entire identity. Bonita Johnson. Meticulous and careful and perfect. Bonita Johnson who never made mistakes. And she'd just made the biggest one of her career. Her phone was in her hand before she consciously decided to grab it, but it was 11:47 p.m. Too late to call anyone. Too late to get back into the building. Too late to fix this tonight. She'd have to wait until morning. Show up at 6 when weekend security arrived. Beg them to let her in. Pray her laptop was still there, untouched. Bonita sank down onto her kitchen floor, ignoring the broken glass, and pressed her forehead against her knees. How could she have been so stupid? The knock came at exactly midnight. Bonita's head snapped up from where she'd been sitting on the kitchen floor, still frozen in panic. Nobody knocked at midnight. Not in this building. Not on a Friday. Not ever. She stood slowly, glass crunching under her shoes, and moved toward the door like she was approaching a wild animal. Through the peephole, she saw him, tall, dark hair pulled back in a precise bun, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and in his hands, her navy blue laptop bag with the fraying strap. Brian Hirano from the penthouse office on 45. Bonita's heart stopped, then started again at triple speed. She unlocked the door with shaking hands, opening it just wide enough for the chain lock to catch. Mr. Hirano, Miss Johnson. His voice was smooth, controlled, like showing up at an employee's apartment at midnight was perfectly normal. I believe you forgot something. He lifted the laptop bag slightly. Bonita's eyes locked onto it with the desperation of a drowning person spotting shore. How did you know where I live? HR files. He said it casually, like that explained everything. Like accessing employee records at midnight wasn't a massive violation. You left this on your desk. I was reviewing documents in the building and noticed it. Given the security protocols and the weekend lockdown, I thought it would be simpler to deliver it myself. Every word sounded reasonable. Every word made Bonita's skin crawl. That's very kind, but you didn't have to do that. She kept her voice steady, professional, the same tone she used with senior partners. You could have left it with security. I could have. He tilted his head, studying her through the gap with dark, unreadable eyes. But I wanted to meet you. The words hung between them, heavy with implications Bonita didn't want to examine. Meet me, why? Because you're very good at your job, Miss Johnson. Your work on the Morrison account is impressive, thorough, precise. His smile didn't reach his eyes. You see patterns that others miss. Ice flooded Bonita's veins. He'd looked through her files. He'd read her work. The financial discrepancies she'd noted. The suspicious transactions. The patterns that looked too clean, too structured, too perfect. The irregular transactions, she said quietly, very observant. His smile sharpened. That's exactly what I wanted to discuss. It's late. Perhaps we could schedule a meeting during office hours. I don't think you want to have this conversation in the office, Miss Johnson. Not where others might overhear. It wasn't a threat. Not exactly. But Bonita heard the warning underneath every polite word. She glanced down the hallway. Mrs. Chen's door was cracked open, the old woman definitely listening. Bonita made a decision that might destroy her life and unhooked the chain. Brian Hirano walked into her apartment like he owned it, making her small space feel impossibly smaller. He set the laptop bag on her coffee table with careful precision, then turned to face her. Up close, he was devastating. Younger than she'd thought, maybe mid-30s, broad-shouldered under that impeccable suit, eyes that missed absolutely nothing. Your observations about the subsidiary accounts were correct, he said simply. The transactions are structured to appear legitimate while serving another purpose. You're one of 3 people in that entire building smart enough to notice. Money laundering, among other things. He pulled a card from his jacket and set it beside her laptop. I have business interests that require someone with your particular skills. Someone intelligent, discreet, someone who sees what others miss. I already have a job. You have a position where you work 16-hour days for people who barely know your name. I'm offering you something more interesting and significantly more lucrative. Interesting is one word for it. You're afraid. Not a question. I'm cautious. Fair enough. He moved toward the door, then paused. Delete those notes from your personal files, Miss Johnson, and be more careful about what you save on company equipment. You never know who might be reviewing the servers. There it was. The actual threat? Delivered with the same pleasant tone. Thank you for returning my laptop. You should rest. You look exhausted. His dark eyes swept over her pajamas, her exhausted face. And do be careful walking alone late at night. The city can be dangerous. Then he was gone, leaving Bonita standing in her apartment, shaking, staring at the business card on her coffee table. Black cardstock, silver lettering, just a name and a phone number. She'd made a simple mistake tonight, forgetting her laptop. And somehow, that mistake had just changed everything. The text came Sunday evening while Bonita was reviewing her presentation for the 100th time. An unknown number, but she knew who it was before she even opened it. Dinner tomorrow, 7 p.m. Oriole, I'll send a car. Not a question. Not a request. A statement of fact, like her attendance was already decided. Bonita stared at her phone for a full minute before typing back. I have work. The response came immediately. You'll make time. We have business to discuss. She should refuse. She should block the number. She should pretend Friday night never happened and focus on her presentation that was now less than 12 hours away. Instead, she typed, fine. The Morrison presentation went perfectly. The senior partners nodded in all the right places, asked intelligent questions, seemed genuinely impressed with her analysis. By noon, Bonita had 3 separate emails complimenting her work. By 2, her supervisor had stopped by her desk to tell her she was being considered for a promotion. It should have been the best day of her career. Instead, all she could think about was 7 o'clock. The car arrived at 6:30. Black, expensive, with a driver who opened the door without speaking. Bonita had changed into the only designer dress she owned, a simple black sheath she'd bought on sale for networking events. Next to Brian Hirano's suit on Friday, it had probably looked cheap. Next to this car, it definitely did. Oriole was the kind of restaurant where people spoke in hushed tones, and the cheapest wine cost more than Bonita's weekly grocery budget. The hostess took one look at her and said, Miss Johnson, Mr. Hirano is waiting. Of course he'd already given them her name. Of course he was already here. He stood when she approached, perfect manners from a man who'd invaded her apartment at midnight. He wore a different suit, navy this time, somehow even more expensive looking than the last one. Miss Johnson, thank you for coming. Did I have a choice? Everyone has choices. He gestured to the chair across from him. Some are just more pleasant than others. Bonita sat. A waiter appeared instantly with water and wine, then vanished like smoke. Your presentation went well today, Brian said conversationally. Congratulations. How do you know about my presentation? I make it my business to know things, especially about people who interest me. He studied her across the table, his dark eyes missing nothing. You impressed the senior partners. Phillips especially. He's already talking about moving you to the executive team. That's what I've been working toward for 2 years. And you deserve it. Your analysis was exceptional. He leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed. Which brings us to why we're here. You want to threaten me into silence about what I found. Threaten you? He looked genuinely amused. No, Miss Johnson. I want to hire you. I already have a job. You have a position where you'll work yourself into the ground for a promotion that might happen in 5 years. I'm offering you something more immediate, more lucrative, and infinitely more interesting. The waiter returned with menus. Brian ordered for both of them without asking. Dishes Bonita couldn't pronounce. She should have been annoyed. Instead, she was focused on the way he'd said, more interesting, like it was a promise and a warning combined. What exactly would this job entail? Consulting. Private financial analysis for my various business interests. Structure optimization. Risk assessment. The kind of work you already do, just with better compensation. Better compensation for hiding money laundering, for understanding complex financial structures, he corrected smoothly. Some of which operate in gray areas of international law. But you'd be analyzing, not participating. Your hands would stay clean. My hands would absolutely not stay clean. Cleaner than you think. He leaned forward slightly. Here's the situation, Miss Johnson. You found discrepancies in those files. You made notes. Very detailed, very accurate notes about transactions that, if examined too closely, could cause problems for certain people. People like you, people who own the company you work for, people who sign your paychecks, people who decide whether your presentation was impressive enough for that promotion. His voice never changed, still perfectly pleasant. Your supervisor Phillips, the CFO, they all know about those transactions. They're not victims, they're participants. Bonita's stomach dropped. She'd suspected, but hearing it confirmed was different. So if I refuse your offer, then you'll find yourself in a difficult position. Those notes you made might accidentally reach the wrong people, federal investigators perhaps, and you'll discover that your coworkers are very good at pointing fingers at the person who's not part of their club. You're blackmailing me. I'm offering you a choice. Work with me directly, get paid extremely well, and have some control over what you're analyzing. Or stay at Sterling Financial, where you're already analyzing the same transactions, but for people who'll throw you under the bus the moment it's convenient. He picked up his wine glass. At least I'm being honest about what this is. The food arrived. Perfectly plated, probably delicious. Bonita couldn't taste any of it. How much? She heard herself ask. Triple your current salary to start. More as you prove valuable. He named a figure that made Bonita's head spin. Plus expenses. Plus the knowledge that you're working for someone who actually values your intelligence. This is insane. This is business. Complicated, sometimes uncomfortable business. But business nonetheless. He set down his fork and looked at her directly. You've already seen too much to walk away clean, Miss Johnson. The only question is whether you're smart enough to profit from that knowledge or naive enough to think you can pretend it doesn't exist. Bonita sat back in her chair, her untouched food growing cold, and realized she'd been trapped from the moment she forgot that laptop. Brian Hirano smiled like he could read her thoughts. Take 48 hours to decide, but choose carefully. Some doors only open once. Bonita's phone buzzed during a Tuesday morning meeting with an encrypted message. Review the attached files. Call me in 1 hour. Use the secure line. She excused herself to the bathroom, opened the files on her phone, and felt her stomach drop. Shell companies in the Caymans. Transaction chains through 6 different countries. Money moving in circles so complex they looked like abstract art, and she could see exactly how it all worked. She made the call from the stairwell, using the burner phone Brian had sent her 3 days after their dinner. His voice was crisp, businesslike. Walk me through the vulnerability in the Singapore structure. 3rd-tier subsidiary. The ownership documentation has a gap. If anyone looks closely, they'll see it doesn't connect properly to the parent company. Fix it. I'll send you the access codes. I'm at work. Then work faster. She did. Between her regular assignments, hidden in bathroom stalls and empty conference rooms, Bonita restructured Brian's Singapore operation. It took her 4 hours and felt like the most illegal thing she'd ever done. It also felt exhilarating in a way her regular work never had. By week 3, she had a rhythm. Morning analysis for Sterling Financial. Afternoon encrypted calls with Brian. Evening reviews of his international holdings. She was sleeping 4 hours a night and running on espresso and adrenaline. Marcus noticed first. You look exhausted, her colleague said, appearing at her desk with concerned eyes. And you keep taking calls in the stairwell. Everything okay? Just personal stuff. Family issues? You don't have family in the city. Bonita's blood went cold. How do you know that? You mentioned it once. At the holiday party. Marcus leaned against her cubicle wall, casual but watchful. Look, if something's wrong you can tell me. We're friends, right? Everything's fine. Just tired. But Marcus didn't look convinced, and that night Bonita called Brian. My colleague is asking questions. Marcus Chen. I know. He's been researching me. How do you know that? Because I pay attention. Don't worry. I'll handle it. Handle it how? Brian's pause was deliberate. Do you really want to know? She didn't. The next day, Brian walked into Sterling Financial at 2 p.m., looking like he belonged there. Tailored suit, leather briefcase, the confident stride of someone who owned buildings like this. He stopped at reception, spoke to the startled receptionist, and within minutes was being escorted to the executive floor. Bonita watched from her desk, frozen, as he disappeared into the conference room with 2 senior partners. Marcus appeared beside her. Who's that? Potential client, I think. He looks familiar. Like I've seen his photo somewhere. Bonita's hands went numb. Probably just has one of those faces. But Marcus was already pulling out his phone, and Bonita knew she was seconds away from disaster when Brian emerged from the conference room, shook hands with the partners, and walked directly toward her desk. Miss Johnson, perfect timing. The partners mentioned you're their best analyst. I'd like you to join our next meeting. It wasn't a request. Marcus watched them walk away, and Bonita could feel his suspicion like a physical weight. That evening, Brian sent a car. Not to her apartment, to an address in a part of the city where buildings didn't have numbers, just names. The club was underground, literally. Downstairs that seemed to descend forever, into a space that was all dark wood and darker secrets. Men in expensive suits spoke in low tones. Women who looked like they belonged in magazines draped themselves over leather furniture. Everyone moved with the careful awareness of people who knew exactly how dangerous this place was. Brian met her at the entrance, his hand settling on her lower back with casual possession. Welcome to where the real business happens. He introduced her to people whose names she recognized from financial news. A shipping magnate under investigation for sanctions violations. A tech CEO who'd been accused of insider trading. A woman who owned half the real estate in Lower Manhattan through companies that officially didn't exist. They all treated Brian with a deference that made Bonita's skin prickle. In a private room upstairs, she watched him negotiate a deal that involved moving $50 million through structures so complex, she barely followed them. He was brilliant, ruthless. Every word calculated, every gesture deliberate. When someone tried to renegotiate terms, Brian's voice dropped to something cold and final. The offer stands as presented. Accept it, or explain to your investors why you lost this opportunity. The man accepted. Later, in the car heading back to her apartment, Bonita couldn't stop her hands from shaking. You're afraid, Brian observed. I'm processing. What you saw tonight is who I actually am. Not the consultant. Not the businessman. This. He turned to look at her in the dim interior. Does it terrify you? It should. Bonita knew it should. But all she could think about was the way his mind worked, the elegant brutality of his strategies, the precision of his power. It should terrify me, she said honestly. But it doesn't. No. She met his eyes. It doesn't. Brian smiled, and for the first time, it reached his eyes. Good, because you're far too intelligent to waste on fear. The German deal was falling apart at 3 a.m. When Bonita caught it, she'd been reviewing the contract structure for hours, something nagging at her about the third-party guarantees. Then she saw it. A clause buried in Section 14 that would give the other party complete control if a single technicality wasn't met. A technicality that was impossible to meet based on the timeline already agreed upon. She called Brian immediately. Don't sign anything. It's a trap. 6 hours later, he called back. You just saved me $80 million and a significant amount of blood. My penthouse. 8 o'clock. We need to talk. The penthouse occupied the entire 45th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Furniture that looked like art. Everything precise and perfect and completely controlled, just like Brian himself. He answered the door in dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. No jacket, no tie. It was the most undone Bonita had ever seen him, and somehow that felt more intimate than anything else. You're brilliant, he said without preamble. That clause would have destroyed me. No one else caught it. Not my lawyers, not my advisors. Just you. I almost missed it too, but you didn't. He poured 2 glasses of wine, handed her one. You see patterns. It's not just intelligence. It's instinct. They sat in his living room, the city glittering below them. And for the first time since she'd met him, Brian looked tired. My father started the family business when he was 19, he said quietly, staring into his wine. Came from Osaka with nothing. Built an empire through violence and strategy. By the time I was born, we controlled shipping routes across the Pacific. Bonita stayed silent, afraid that speaking would shatter whatever moment this was. I was supposed to be legitimate, the son who went to Harvard, who wore suits and made legal deals, the acceptable face of the family. His laugh was bitter. But my older brother got himself killed being reckless. And suddenly I was the heir, 23 years old, and inheriting an empire built on blood. You didn't want it. I wanted to survive. The only way to survive was to be better than everyone else. Smarter, more ruthless, so calculated that no one could touch me. He looked at her finally, his dark eyes reflecting the city lights. I've been doing this for 12 years. Building legitimate businesses to hide the illegitimate ones. Restructuring, consolidating, trying to transition into something that won't get me killed or imprisoned. Is that possible? I don't know, but I'm trying. He set down his wine glass. Do you know what the worst part is? Everyone fears me. Everyone wants something from me, but no one actually sees me. I'm just a threat, or an opportunity. I see you, Bonita said quietly. I know. His voice was rough. That's the problem. The space between them felt charged, dangerous. Bonita should leave, should maintain the professional distance she'd been clinging to, should remember that this man was her employer, her blackmailer, her entry into a world that could destroy her. Instead, she set down her own glass and closed the distance. Brian caught her wrist, his grip gentle but firm. If we do this, everything changes. You understand that? Everything already changed the night you brought back my laptop. Bonita. Her name on his lips sounded different. Not Miss Johnson. Not the analyst. Just her. I'm not a good man. I'm not looking for a good man. I'm looking at you. His control shattered. He pulled her close, his kiss fierce and desperate, like he'd been holding back for weeks. Maybe he had. Maybe they both had. They ended up in his bedroom with its wall of windows, the city watching as they crossed every line they'd been dancing around. Brian was intense, focused, paying attention to every reaction like he was solving a complex problem, like she was the most important analysis he'd ever conducted. Afterward, lying tangled in sheets that probably cost more than her monthly rent, Bonita traced the scar on his shoulder. "What's this from?" "Negotiation that went badly. I was 25 and thought I was invincible." He caught her hand, pressed it against his chest where she could feel his heartbeat. "I have a lot of scars. Most of them you can't see." "So do I." "I know." He turned to look at her, his expression unguarded in a way she'd never seen. "You hide them behind perfection. Behind never making mistakes. Behind being so controlled that no one can hurt you. You don't get to psychoanalyze me just because we slept together." "I'm not psychoanalyzing. I'm recognizing a kindred spirit." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "We're both people who can't afford to be vulnerable, who've built entire identities around being untouchable. And yet here we are." "Here we are," he agreed. Bonita should feel guilty, should feel conflicted, should feel something other than this overwhelming sense of rightness. Instead, she felt like she'd finally stopped pretending. "This is dangerous," she said. "Everything about us is dangerous." Brian pulled her closer. "But I'm done pretending I don't want you. Done pretending this is just business." "What is it then?" "I don't know. But I want to find out." Bonita kissed him again, slower this time, and realized her feelings had shifted from fear to something infinitely more terrifying. She was falling for a man who could destroy her, and she didn't want to stop. Bonita woke up in Brian's penthouse more often than her own apartment. It happened gradually, insidiously. One night became two. Two became a week. Suddenly, she had a drawer in his bathroom, her favorite coffee in his kitchen, a key to the private elevator. "Come with me to the port tomorrow," Brian said over breakfast one morning, scrolling through his phone with one hand while his other rested possessively on her thigh. "I'm finalizing the shipping contract." The port was controlled chaos. Containers stacked like building blocks, trucks rumbling past, the smell of salt water and diesel. Brian moved through it all like he owned it, which he probably did through 6 different shell companies. His associates treated Bonita with careful respect, not quite deference, but close. She was Brian's, which meant she was untouchable. "The manifests don't match the cargo weights," she murmured to him while they reviewed paperwork in a cramped office. "Someone's skimming." Brian's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "How much?" "Maybe 2%, consistent across the last 6 months." He made a phone call in Japanese, his voice measured and calm. Then he turned to the port manager who'd been hovering nervously. "Thank you for your time. We'll be in touch." Later in the car, Bonita asked, "What happens to him?" "The manager?" "Nothing. He wasn't involved. But whoever's been skimming has 48 hours to return what they took, or I'll remove their ability to steal from me permanently." The casual way he said it made Bonita's skin prickle. But then that night, he took her to a children's hospital his foundation funded. Watched him sit with a 6-year-old girl, speaking softly in Japanese as she showed him her drawings. Saw genuine warmth in his eyes when the staff thanked him for the new pediatric wing. "You're complicated," she said in the elevator afterward. "I contain multitudes." His smile was wry. "Does it bother you?" "Yes. No. I don't know." She leaned against him, exhausted by trying to reconcile the man who threatened violence with the one who sat patiently with sick children. "You make it impossible to see you in simple terms." "Good. Simple men are boring." He kissed her forehead. "And you're far too intelligent to waste your time on boring." 3 weeks in, he took her to a dinner with his inner circle. 8 people who controlled various pieces of his empire. They studied her like she was a puzzle to solve. This corporate analyst who'd somehow captured their boss's attention. A woman named Yuki, who managed Brian's Tokyo operations, cornered Bonita in the bathroom. "You're the first person he's brought to these dinners in 5 years. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. He's different with you." "Different how?" "Less cold, more human." Yuki reapplied her lipstick, her expression thoughtful. "Brian has spent his entire adult life being what his family needed him to be. With you, I think he's trying to be himself." The words stayed with Bonita for days. She was falling deeper, drowning in the intoxication of being truly seen. Brian listened when she talked about her work, challenged her analysis, valued her opinion, made her feel essential in ways her actual job never had. But he was also suffocating. His security followed her everywhere. He texted constantly, got tense when she worked late at Sterling Financial. His protection felt like possession. "I need some space." she said one evening when he questioned why she'd turned off her location sharing. Space gets people killed in my world. I'm not in your world. Not really. I still have my job, my apartment, my life. You stopped sleeping at your apartment 3 weeks ago. You're consulting on deals worth hundreds of millions. You know things that could destroy me. His hand cupped her face. Gentle but firm. You're absolutely in my world, Bonita. The question is whether you're ready to accept what that means. She wanted to argue. Wanted to claim independence she wasn't sure she still had. Instead, she kissed him, because it was easier than facing the truth that she was losing herself in him. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. They were in Brian's home office, reviewing contracts, when his phone rang. His expression went blank in a way that made Bonita's stomach drop. Where? Pause. How much? Longer pause. Handle it. I want him alive. Barely. He hung up, and for a moment his mask slipped. Pure rage, cold and controlled. One of my lieutenants has been selling information to a rival organization. Details about shipments, payment schedules, personnel. His voice was eerily calm. He's going to learn what happens to traitors. Brian, what does that mean? He looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes that she'd been able to ignore until now. The capacity for violence. Real, brutal violence. It means I'm going to make an example of him. Because in my world, betrayal has consequences, and those consequences need to be visible. How visible? Visible enough that no one else makes the same mistake. Bonita's hands went cold. You're going to kill him. No. But he'll wish I had. Brian stood, kissed her forehead like he wasn't discussing torture. Stay here. I'll be back in a few hours. He left, and Bonita sat alone in his penthouse, surrounded by luxury and security, realizing exactly who she'd fallen in love with. A man capable of extraordinary gentleness and extraordinary cruelty, and she wasn't sure which terrified her more. The first message came while Bonita was at Sterling Financial, buried in quarterly reports. Unknown number. A photo of her leaving Brian's building that morning, coffee in hand, wearing yesterday's clothes. Pretty girl. Dangerous boyfriend. Her blood went cold. She deleted it immediately, told herself it was nothing. Spam. A wrong number. Anything but what she knew it actually was. The second message came 3 hours later. Another photo. Her walking to the subway. Closer this time. Taken from maybe 20 feet away. He can't protect you everywhere. Bonita's hands shook as she forwarded both messages to Brian. His response was immediate. Leave work now. Car is outside. Don't argue. She didn't argue. The car took her straight to his penthouse. Brian was already there, phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Japanese. His expression was granite. When he hung up, he pulled her close, his hands framing her face. Who have you told about us? No one. Just Simone, and she doesn't know details. Your colleague Marcus has been asking questions. Following you. Taking photos. Marcus wouldn't threaten me. Not Marcus directly. But someone's using the information he's gathering. Brian's jaw tightened. The Kozlov organization. Russian operation. Trying to expand into my territory. They've been looking for leverage. What does that mean? It means you're a target now. It means they think hurting you will hurt me. His voice dropped. They're right. That night, Brian's security moved into the apartment across from hers. Cameras went up in her hallway. She got a new phone with security protocols that would make the NSA jealous, and a detail followed her everywhere. 2 men who looked like they ate threats for breakfast. This is insane, Bonita said. I can't live like this. You can. You will. Because the alternative is you getting hurt to punish me. 2 days later, someone broke into her actual apartment. Nothing stolen, just destruction. Her clothes shredded, her furniture overturned, and a message spray-painted on her bedroom wall. Tell your boyfriend we're coming. Bonita stood in the wreckage of her carefully organized life and felt something break inside her. This apartment was supposed to be safe. Separate. The one place that was still hers. Now even that was gone. Brian's response was swift and brutal. 3 of Kozlov's operations were hit within 24 hours. A warehouse burned. A shipment intercepted. A lieutenant hospitalized with injuries the police report carefully didn't detail. It's handled, Brian told her, but his eyes were cold in a way that made her stomach turn. What did you do? What I had to. They needed to understand that touching you means war. And Marcus? Bonita asked quietly. What happens to him? Marcus? Brian's expression sharpened. What about Marcus? She'd been dreading this conversation. He's been researching you, compiling evidence, financial connections, property records, patterns in your business dealings. How do you know this? He approached me yesterday, at lunch. Bonita's throat tightened. He thinks he's protecting me. He said he's worried about who I'm involved with. He has documents, Brian. Enough to start connecting pieces. Brian was silent for a long moment, his face unreadable. Where is this evidence? I don't know. He wouldn't say. He just wanted to warn me. She grabbed his arm. He's my friend. He's trying to help. He's a threat. He's a good person who's worried about his colleague. Good people who ask the wrong questions get hurt in my world, Bonita. You know this. Brian pulled away, reaching for his phone. I need to contain this before it becomes a problem. Contain it how? Her voice rose. What are you going to do to him? Whatever is necessary. No. Bonita stepped between Brian and his phone. You're not touching him. He's not part of this. He's just someone who cares enough to notice something's wrong. And that caring is going to get him killed by someone less patient than me if he keeps digging. The Kozlovs have people everywhere. If Marcus is compiling evidence about me, they'll find out. They'll use him. Then warn him. Tell him to stop. But don't hurt him. Brian stared at her, and she saw the calculation in his eyes, weighing options, measuring risks, deciding whether Marcus Chen was a loose end that needed cutting. Please, Bonita whispered. If you care about me at all, please don't hurt him. I care about keeping you alive. Marcus and his crusade threaten that. He's not a crusade. He's a person. A good person who doesn't deserve to be collateral damage. The silence stretched between them, and Bonita realized she was standing at a crossroads. This was the moment, the line she couldn't uncross. If she let Brian handle Marcus his way, she was complicit. If she protected Marcus, she was betraying Brian. There was no good choice. There never had been. I'll talk to him, Brian said finally. Explain the situation. Give him a chance to walk away. And if he doesn't, Brian's expression was answer enough. Bonita closed her eyes, nausea rising in her throat. She'd made her choice the night she opened her door to Brian Hirano. Everything since then had been inevitable. Now she just had to live with the consequences. The federal agents appeared at Sterling Financial on a Tuesday morning. 2 of them, badges discreet, voices low. Miss Johnson, we need to talk about Brian Hirano. They took her to a conference room. Spread files across the table. Transaction records. Shell companies. Surveillance photos of Brian meeting with known criminals. And there, in the middle of everything, her own financial analysis, the consulting work she'd done over the past 2 months. We know you've been helping him restructure his operations, Agent Morrison said. Her voice was matter-of-fact, not accusatory. We know he's paying you. We know you're involved. Bonita's mouth went dry. I want a lawyer. You're not under arrest. Not yet. We're offering you a choice. Agent Chen, Marcus's last name suddenly taking on new significance, slid a document across the table. Full immunity. Witness protection if necessary. All you have to do is testify about the financial structures you helped create. I don't know what you're talking about. Miss Johnson, your colleague Marcus Chen has been cooperating with us for 3 weeks. He's provided extensive documentation. We have enough to prosecute you right now. Morrison's expression softened slightly. But we don't want you. We want Hirano, and you're the only person close enough to give us what we need. Marcus. Marcus had gone to the FBI. The research, the questions, the warning he'd given her. It had all been leading here. Marcus is in protective custody, Chen added. He was approached by the Kozlov organization yesterday. We had to extract him before they made him disappear. So Brian's warning had been right. Marcus's curiosity had nearly gotten him killed. You have 48 hours, Morrison said. After that, the deal expires, and we prosecute you along with Hirano. Think about whether he's worth destroying your life for. They left her in the conference room, surrounded by evidence of everything she'd become. Her phone buzzed. Brian. I need you. Now. Everything's falling apart. She found him in his penthouse, papers scattered everywhere, his usually perfect composure cracking. The Tokyo deal collapsed. Someone leaked the terms to the Yakuza. They're demanding renegotiation, or they're coming for me. I need your analysis. Need you to find a way to restructure this that doesn't leave me vulnerable. Brian, I need to tell you something. Not now. I need you focused. This deal is worth $200 million, and if it falls through, I lose everything. My entire operation depends on this. He grabbed her shoulders, desperate in a way she'd never seen. I need you, Bonita. You're the only person I trust to see the solution." She looked at the man she loved, unraveling in front of her, then thought about the federal agents, the immunity deal, the chance to walk away clean, 48 hours to choose between the life she'd built and the man who destroyed it, between safety and love, between who she'd been and who she'd become. "Show me the files," she heard herself say. Brian's relief was palpable. He pulled her close, kissed her fiercely. "Thank you. I knew you wouldn't abandon me." But as Bonita sat down to analyze the deal that could save or destroy him, she realized abandonment was exactly what she was contemplating. She just hadn't decided which choice would be the real betrayal. The raids came at dawn on Thursday, 47 hours after the federal agents had given Bonita her ultimatum. She was in Brian's penthouse when the calls started flooding in. Warehouses, port facilities, office buildings. The FBI was hitting everything simultaneously. Brian's face went white. "They have everything. Someone gave them everything." "Not everything," Bonita said quietly. "Just enough." He turned to her slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "What did you do?" "I made a different deal." Her voice was steady despite her pounding heart. "I gave them the Kozlov organization, your corrupt business partners at Sterling Financial, the Yakuza lieutenants who were planning to kill you. I gave them everyone who was actually dangerous. And me? What did you give them about me? Documentation showing clear legal separation between your legitimate businesses and the criminal operations. Proof that you've been systematically divesting from illegal activities for the past year. Financial structures that demonstrate you're transitioning out, not deeper in." She met his furious gaze. "I gave them a version of you they can live with. You had no right. I had every right. They were going to destroy you. Destroy us. This was the only way." "The only way?" His voice rose, control shattering. "You went behind my back, made deals with federal agents, restructured my entire empire without asking me. You would have said no. You would have fought. And you would have lost." Bonita stepped closer, refusing to back down. "I spent 3 days building a case that saves your legitimate businesses, while giving the FBI everything they need to take down your actual enemies. The Kozlovs are finished. The corrupt officials at Sterling are facing charges. Your Yakuza problem is solved. By betraying me, by saving you. There's a difference." Her hands clenched into fists. "You're brilliant, Brian, but you're so used to controlling everything that you can't see when control is killing you. Your empire was collapsing. Your enemies were circling. The FBI had enough evidence to destroy you. I found the only path through, without consulting me, because you would have chosen pride over survival. You would have gone down fighting rather than compromise." Her voice cracked slightly. "And I wasn't willing to watch you destroy yourself when I could prevent it." Brian stared at her, rage and betrayal warring in his expression. "You should have trusted me to handle it, and you should have trusted me to make impossible choices." She grabbed his arm when he tried to turn away. "I love you. That's why I did this. Not to control you, not to betray you, but because losing you wasn't an option I could accept." "Love?" His laugh was bitter. "You manipulated everything, used your access to my operations, made deals that affect my entire future. That's not love, Bonita. That's a hostile takeover." The words cut deeper than any physical wound, but Bonita didn't flinch. "Then I'm guilty of a hostile takeover. But you're alive, free, and your legitimate businesses are intact. Hate me if you need to, but don't pretend I had another choice." The silence between them was deafening. Finally, Brian spoke, his voice carefully controlled. "Agent Morrison called me an hour ago. Offered me a deal if I cooperate with their investigation into the Kozlovs. I know. I negotiated it. Of course you did." He moved to the window, staring out at the city. "I've spent 12 years building this empire. Being feared, being untouchable, and you dismantled half of it in 3 days. I dismantled the half that was going to get you killed or imprisoned. The rest is still yours. Is it? Or have you just turned me into something I never wanted to be? A legitimate businessman. Neutered. Safe. Alive," Bonita corrected. "The word you're looking for is alive." Brian turned back to her, and she saw exhaustion in his eyes. Exhaustion and something that might have been relief underneath the anger. "I should throw you out, never speak to you again." "You should. But you won't." "Why won't I?" "Because I'm the only person who's ever valued your life more than your empire. The only person who chose you over power." She closed the distance between them. "And because somewhere under all that rage, you know I'm right." His hands came up to frame her face, grip tight enough to bruise. "I am furious with you. I know. You had no right to make these choices. I know that too. But you'd do it again, without hesitation. She covered his hands with hers. Every single time. Brian kissed her then, fierce and angry and desperate. When he pulled back, his expression was complicated. I don't know how to forgive this. Then don't. Not yet. Just don't leave. I couldn't leave even if I wanted to. You've made yourself indispensable. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. That was strategic, wasn't it? Everything I do is strategic. You taught me that. Despite everything, he almost smiled. I've created a monster. No. You found someone who was already a monster. You just didn't realize it until now. Outside, sirens wailed as the FBI continued dismantling the criminal empire Brian had inherited. Inside, they stood together in the wreckage of trust and power, trying to figure out if what remained was enough to build on. Bonita didn't have the answer. But for the first time since opening her door to Brian Hirano, she knew exactly who she was, someone willing to burn the world to save the person she loved, even if he hated her for it. 6 months after the raids, Bonita stood in what used to be Brian's home office and was now their shared workspace. Her name was on the door downstairs. Johnson Hirano Consulting. Brian had insisted on the hyphen. The Singapore expansion projections look solid, she said, highlighting numbers on her screen. But we need to restructure the subsidiary ownership before we proceed. The current setup still looks too much like the old model. Brian leaned over her shoulder, his hand resting casually on her back. Agreed. Can you draft the new structure by Friday? Already done. It's in the shared drive. Of course it is. His smile was genuine now, the cold calculation replaced by something warmer. You're insufferably efficient. You love it. I do. The transition hadn't been easy. The first month after the raids, Brian had barely spoken to her. He'd coordinated with the FBI through his lawyers, divested from the operations Bonita had marked as unsalvageable, and rebuilt what remained with surgical precision. She'd expected him to cut her out completely. Instead, he'd shown up at her apartment at 2 a.m. 6 weeks after everything fell apart. I need a partner, he'd said without preamble. Someone who understands both sides of what I'm building. Someone I can trust to make impossible decisions when I can't see them clearly. You hate me. I hated what you did. There's a difference. He'd stepped inside, exhausted and raw. But you were right. About all of it. I would have fought until they destroyed me. You saved my life by destroying my pride. So what now? Now we build something new. Together. With rules this time. Boundaries. Real partnership, not ownership. They'd spent the next 3 months hammering out those boundaries. Bonita had her own office, her own accounts, her own security that answered to her. Brian consulted her on major decisions, but didn't demand access to every aspect of her work. She did the same. It wasn't perfect. He still got possessive. She still made unilateral decisions when she thought she knew better. But they fought now, loud and honest, instead of dancing around power dynamics. Marcus had reached out 2 months ago, safely relocated through witness protection. I heard you're working with him now. Are you okay? I'm exactly where I choose to be, she'd written back. That's all that matters. Sterling Financial had collapsed in the FBI investigation. Bonita didn't regret its demise. She'd built something better from the ashes. Now she ran consulting for Brian's legitimate empire, which was substantial enough without the criminal elements. Shipping, real estate, tech investments, clean money, clean operations, clean conscience. Mostly clean. The Tokyo partners want to meet next week, Brian said, reading an email over her shoulder. They're interested in expanding our partnership. The ones with the questionable connections to the Yakuza? Former connections. They've restructured too. How convenient. Bonita closed her laptop, the same navy bag with the fraying strap sitting next to it. She'd never replaced it. Are we doing this? That depends. What does your analysis say? She appreciated that he asked now, that he valued her judgment enough to let it override his instincts. I think we can work with them if we establish clear separation between their legacy operations and our partnership. But I want independent verification of their financials. Done. Brian pulled her up from her chair, his arms sliding around her waist. You know what today is? Tuesday. 6 months since you betrayed me to save my life. Is that what we're calling it now? That's what it was. He kissed her forehead, the gesture familiar and grounding. I've been thinking about what you said that day. About choosing me over power. And I choose you too, every time. Even when you're insufferably right about everything. Bonita laughed, the sound free in a way it never had been at Sterling Financial. That's the most romantic thing you've ever said to me. I'm working on it. Romance doesn't come naturally to former alleged crime bosses. The FBI has a very thick file that says otherwise. But we don't talk about that. He glanced at her laptop, still sitting between them. Do you ever think about that night, when I showed up at your door? All the time. I thought my career was over. Turns out it was just beginning. You thought I was going to threaten you. You did threaten me. Very politely. And you still opened the door. Worst decision of my life, Bonita said, but she was smiling. Or the best. I still haven't decided. Brian kissed her properly this time, deep and thorough. We should probably get back to work. Probably. Neither of them moved. Outside the penthouse windows, the city glittered with possibilities. Inside, they stood together, surrounded by the legitimate empire they'd built from the ruins of the old one. It wasn't the life Bonita had planned. It was dangerous and complicated and required constant vigilance. But it was hers. Chosen, consciously, with full knowledge of the cost. And that made all the difference. Her laptop sat on the desk between them, a reminder of the night one forgotten mistake had changed everything. She'd thought leaving it behind was a disaster. She'd been wrong. It was the beginning of something far more terrifying and real than anything she'd imagined. And she wouldn't change a single moment of it. Thank you for diving into Bonita and Brian's world. What started with a simple mistake at midnight became a story of power, transformation, and the dangerous price of love. Hit that subscribe button to get notified when new stories drop. More edge-of-your-seat romance, more characters who refuse to be simple, more midnight encounters that change everything.